We go to the Chitas of today. Today is Friday. We're holding the sixth reading of the portion. And we're holding on the chapter 27, verse number 1. We are going now to the Mizbeach. You make this is the outer Mizbeach. This is the outer Mizbeach. The Mizbeach that was outside. And Atze Shittim, you have to make it out of acacia wood. Chamesh Ames Eirech. The Chamesh Ames Reicha, 5 cubits its length and 5 cubits its width. Ravua, it was a square. Yeh Mizbeach, the Mizbeach needs to be square. V'shlolosh Ames Keimasei, and 3 cubits is high. Now she says it sits on Mizbeach, Shlolosh Ames Keimasei. The words are to be literally taken literally. This is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi says that the word Ravua, square, and it says regarding the inner altar Ravua, square, just as there it was height is double its length, so too here the height is double its length. How did it explain? And the 3 cubits high? From the edge of it, from the edge of its border. So this, you got to go to the Gemara's Zvachim, exactly how the height of the Mizbeach and the different opinions and there were different levels in this Mizbeach, from the Yesod, from the foundations to the top of the Mizbeach. Vasisa kindness albar penis. Then you have to make 4 corners. You have to make 4 corners on this Mizbeach. A many year kanesa, the corners should become from the Mizbeach. It's a piece of the Cheshes, and this Mizbeach is covered with copper. So Rashi says again, you must make it from the base of the Mizbeach. The corners come from it. And it's not separately, then you don't make it separate and attached to it. It comes from the Mizbeach itself. It's a piece in the Cheshes. You have to put a copper in order to tone the brazen and stubbornness. So copper shows the stubbornness. As it says in the Yeshayahu, it says, mitzchad necheshes, and your forehead is brazen, and it's called nechusha, which is copper. It comes from the same word, nechusha, which is brazen, to the word necheshes, which is copper. Verse 3, sisa siroisa of l'dashna, and you have to make its pots to remove its ashes. The ya'av, and its scoops, and its basin, its scoops, its basin, and its fresh hooks. Those are the 4 things that I mentioned in the pasuk: the scoop, the pot, the hook, the pan. Kula l'chol kelev, all its vessels. And Tas and Cheshes, all these vessels were copper. Now she says, Sirois is like a pot. The Dashne, this is what it's talking about. No, wrong picture. That one. This was the pot to take out the ashes. Lahasi Dashne, to remove the ashes into them. And this is how Onkelos translated the mifsei teme, to collect the ashes into them. The dashne may have this meaning, for there are words in Hebrew language where a word may change in a meaning, denoting something constructive or destructive action, such as vatashresh shirasheh. You have implanted its roots. And evil mashtish, and the foot and a fool takes root. It's opposite meanings. and it's uprooted all its produce. Similarly, Ba'aspipirya, one said of fruitful branches, and its opposite Ma'asipurya, meaning he'll cut down its branches. So we see, and it's again, so here Rashi goes through, so here Ladashne means not to place the ashes, but to remove the ashes. V'yav, what's v'yav? And Onkelos translates umagrafeseha, shovels, which you take out the ashes. They are like a cover of a pot made of thin metal, and they have a handle. In Old French, it's vidil. Umizekaisav, it's basins in which to receive the blood, lekabe madad, to receive the blood from the sacrifice. Umizegloisav, and the fresh hooks. These are bent hooks used to hit the flesh on the altar and stick into it so they can be returned over through them on the coals. The wood pile burned quickly, so you had to have a hook to be able to grab the flesh and turn it over. Umachtesa, fire pans. They have a receptacle with which to take the coals from the altar in order to carry them and place them in the inner altar for the purpose of the incense, because they took the fire from the outer altar, the coals from the outer altar, to bring it into the inner altar. So they put the incense upon the inner altar, and the incense would go out, would burn through the coals from the outer altar. On account of being scooped coals, tachtir, they were called machte, scoops. The chol kelev, for all its implement, is the same as kol kelev. Same thing. Look, kol kelev is like kol kelev. Vasisa, you shall make michbar masei reshes. You should make a grate of copper network for it. I hope you can see this picture. That's what it's talking about, that grate, the middle thing right over there. A copper grate. So you should make a copper grate. Reshes nechaisa, vasisa reshes abad tabois, and upon that copper grate, you put 4 tabois. You see that? You see that ring right over there? A ring over there, and there's a ring over there, and there's a ring back there. You can't see the 4th ring. So on that grate, there were four rings. Nechaishes were made all out of copper. Alabak tzev is in the 4 corners of that grate. So Rashi's michba, grate, is related to the word kavra, which is like a sieve, called kribble in Old French. It's a kind of a garment made. It's a kind of a garment made for the altar, made of many holes, like a net. The word of this verse is transparent, both, and it's understood as follows: to make it for copper grate of a network of holes. So it was a design. Verse 5: and asata is a tachas karikav hamizbeach, and you place it, the grate, below the border of the altar. Melamata is extending downwards. This grate, this like gartel of a grate, was at chatzi hamizbeach, was until the middle of the altar. So that was the middle side of the altar. The middle of the altar. That's the. Rashi says on its border, anything that surrounds an object in Hebrew is called karka. As we have learned in the chapter of Hakel Shechtin, these are in the category of unfinished wood vessels, anything one intended to smooth down or adorn with grooves. This is the meaning, just like the round grooves made around the side boards of a box and the wooden benches. The altar also had grooven borders made around it, with the width taking 1 cubit of the wall height for decorative purposes. It was situated 6-foot point of its height, according to the opinion that its height was double its length. How then do we explain, and 3 cubits high, from the edge of the border upwards? So again, look at this picture. You can see. So do you see? It's hard to see. Maybe there's a decorative thing around the right on top of the grate. So he's saying it's 3 amas above that, went above that. However, the altar of the temple, the Beis Hamikdash itself, the copper altar in the tabernacle did not have a surrounding ledge. See, there's a big difference between the temple. It was a bigger altar. It was they had a walk. You can walk around the altar itself. That middle side was not made out of copper. It was made out of stone. This was made out of copper. You couldn't walk around the sides of the altar. It was not made that way. So it was a different kind of a setup between the altar in the Mishkan and ultimately the altar that was in the Beis Hamikdash. So you couldn't walk on top of the sides either to find it. And so we have learned in Zvachim, what is the men karkev in reference to the altar in the temple? It refers to area that actually protrudes out. So with there, they actually had a walkway in the Beis Hamikdash itself. The kohen walked around the altar, in the middle of the altar. So that karkev was not first, it was not nechoshes. It was actually a walkway. It was a mamish. They can walk around the altar physically, around it, and that's the karkev that was in the Beis Hamikdash. So those 2 cubits on the side are called karkev. The Talmud there asks, it is not written below the border of the altar, from which we may infer that the border is along its wall, and the grate forming a garment is below it. And the response is there are 2 entities named karkev, one being decorative border, and one being an area the priest walked on to ensure that they did not slip off the altar. So that was actually in the Beis Hamikdash. It was actually a walkway. So you can say that it was also called karkev, even though in the Mishkan it was not that thing. The one along the wall of the altar was for decoration, and beneath it was attached to the grate, whose width reached a half of the height of the altar. The grate was thus 1 cubit wide, and it marked a half of the height of the altar, which is necessary in order to differentiate, because in Mirchem and Vayikra, you're going to learn that there were certain bloods that were spilled on top of the altar, the top part of the altar, and a certain blood spilled on the bottom of the altar. So we needed to know exactly what was the top and what was the bottom. Therefore, in the Mishkan and in the Beis Hamikdash, both had a midpoint of the altar. As for the ramp by which you ascend the altar, although it's not mentioned explicitly in this passage, we also learned in the passage, you must make for me an altar of earth, that it must not ascend to my altar on steps. So now that's in the Parshas Yisrael. The altar of earth refers to the copper altar. So called was because they filled its hollow with earth wherever they encamped. So so in the Beis Hamikdash it was earth because it was built from the earth. The whole thing was cement. But over here it was made out of copper. But the middle, the center, the inner side of the altar was empty, and they put into it. So they filled it with sand inside. So stated Mechilta. An altar of earth refers to the copper altar, so called because it's filled the hollow of the earth wherever they encamped. The ramp was situated in the south of the altar, separated from the altar by a minute amount. So the ramp didn't actually touch the altar. The ramp, if you see this picture, there's a little separation between the ramp and the altar. It's hard to see, but there was a separation of a small amount between the ramp and the altar. So according to it's lowered and reached 1 cubit away from the courtyard. So it reached 1 cubit to the net of the side of the courtyard, according to the opinion of that the altar was 10 cubits high, and according to the opinion of the statement of 3 cubits high, it is to be taken literally. The length of the ramp was only 10 cubits. So I found the Mishnah of Arbaim Midas. It's exactly how high this altar was. Wasitza baden lamazbeach, in the verse number 6, you should make poles to this altar. That was the rings that was on top of the beautiful netting. There was rings, and there was badim. There were poles that were put because this altar was carried. It's a piece of the chesed over here. The poles need to be covered with copper. You take the poles and you bring it into the rings. You take the poles and you put it in the rings. And you keep these poles on the side of the altar when you carry it. The tabas, the 4 rings were made on the grate, on the karka. Verse 8, in the voice luchas tasa, you should make them hollow structure. Kashahera Isra Bahar, as you showed you in the mountain, Ken Yasu. Its meaning is, as Onkelos translates, Khalil Chluchen, meaning panels of acacia wood on all sides with a hollow in the middle. That's how the Mizbeach was made. It's made inside with the wood, hollow in the middle, covered with copper. But it should be made entirely of one piece of wood that is 5 cubits by 5 cubits thick as a block. And make sure that the inside, that it's hollow in the middle and surrounded and covered by copper. And that completes the Chumash for today. Now I'll go to the Tanya of the day. We're holding the 29th chapter of Tanya. The Alter Rebbe is talking about the Timtum Alev. How do we break unholiness that we are associated, which brings about the dullness of the heart? So the Alter Rebbe brought down the statement of Rav that said in Gan Eden that you have to break yourself. You have to mevachenle. You have to break the situation. You have to bring down the impurities. You got to bring down the reality of my body and all my physical needs, that how unnecessary it is. And it's not the most important thing in my life. And the most important thing in my life is my godly soul. And so the Alter Rebbe said, you have to remember, even though you did tshuva on your sins, the Alter Rebbe ended off yesterday, you have to remember chatas neurim, the sins of youth, and all the things that I've done in my youth, even though that I've done tshuva on them maybe, but tshuva is never ending, and it keeps on going deeper, deeper, and deeper. Ain't tshuva belev. Unless you have a person who is innocent from the grievousness of the youth, but wants to attain a broken spirit, because he's still finding it a struggle, even though he hasn't done sins. He was a wonderful, great kid, great teenager. Yasam Aliba, he should never have said to his heart, Maimed Azayar Kodesh, statement of the Zohar that says, Liyas Memori de Chushbina, to be a master of accounts. Everybody should be an accountant. This means we should do a spiritual accounting, describing below as a master, a proprietor to whom each set of figures represents either a profit or a loss that directly affect him, rather than as a servant, a hired accountant, one who can view whatever the bottom line ventures with academic detachment. So we need to be our own accountant, because if we have somebody else, what does he care? It's not his money. So it's not his loss, it's not his profit. But if a person does it himself, it's his loss and his profits. At least means a person should take stock of his soul. from all his thoughts, his utterances, v'hamaisim, and all the actions that he has done, shachol through miyay avru, which has gone by, miyayim hayesam adayim azef, for the day that he remembers until today. Im hayakula mitzad kedusha, were all his thoughts, speech, and actions all for the sake of holiness? Or were they from the side of unholiness? Heaven help us. That a kol hamashavas v'devurim v'maises. This latter means also all thoughts and utterance or actions, asher lo la Hashem, which was not directed to God, ulotzeinu ulavadase, into the will of God and to the service of God. Shezeh apilus lashon sitra achra, which this is the meaning, the simple meaning of the other side. The other side means something that's impure. That's it, not holy. We think the other side is somebody who's terrible. No, it means unholiness. That's it. It means not for the sake of heaven, not for the sake of godliness. That's what it means. So it's not necessarily evil, but simply the other side, the realm that is not holy. Thus, anything that does not contain holiness belongs to the realm of impurity, as explained earlier in chapter 6. So if everybody is honest with themselves and they make a calculation, they're honest with their lives, they realize how much their life is on mundaneness, on irrelevant things, maybe even on relevant things, but not so important, and he made it very important. And it's basically unholy. That's it. What does is now it is known. It is known, as we mentioned before, anytime a person thinks holy thoughts, that moment when he thought holiness, he became a chariot for holiness. Because this is where his thoughts come from holiness, and therefore he becomes a vehicle for that holiness. Or more precisely, the vitality originates from that holiness. So becoming a chariot means that it becomes completely subservient to the echalos, to the chambers, to the same degree as that of a vehicle. Having no will of its own, it's completely subservient to the driver's will. When he meditates on God, love of God, for example, he becomes a vehicle for the supernal chamber of love, and so on. And so too to the opposite. When a person thinks impure thoughts, thoughts that have nothing to do with holiness, he becomes an unclean vehicle at that moment. To the heichal, to the chambers of impurity. All impure thoughts come from there. So too in speech. So thus, even one who cannot call to mind any past sins can humble his spirit by contemplating how often he became a vehicle to impurity through his thought, words, or actions, which, though not sinful, which are still in the realm of sitra achra, it's still unholy, since they were not directed towards godliness. That means the Alter Rebbe is telling everybody it's not so hard to humble oneself. It's not so hard to be honest with oneself. The Alter Rebbe demanded honesty. It's not too hard to be honest. How great you are. And again, this is between you and yourself. You don't have to go and announce these things. These are between you and yourself. A person should humble himself. That's all the Alter Rebbe wants. Bittul. A person should humble himself. And therefore, why does he want to humble himself? Not because he wants to run nothing. He wants to humble himself to reveal his true self, to reveal his true neshama, which is the most important thing. How can he reveal it? You can't have your cake and eat it in Chassidus. And that's why this is derech harucha. That's why the Alter Rebbe said this is a long but short way. So always remember that. To derech harucha, this is a long but short way. You cannot have easy come, easy go. We're looking for pneumius. We're looking for inner aspects. We're looking for personal things. We're not looking for a fast fix or a fast situation where we get emotionally attached and then we forget about it 10 minutes later. We're looking for true essence, our own essence. We're looking for our own self. Looking for one's own self, he has to break what he thinks he's himself. To reveal his true self, he has to first break the impurity, what he thinks he is himself. And when he can break that, he can come to his true self. So he's hiding. That's why it's called a klippa. To be able to get to the inside of fruits, you have to break the shell. So we're living with the outside. We're living with the outside life, and we'll never get to the inside. Why? Because we're not willing to break the shell. We're not willing to break the klippa. And if we're not willing to break the klippa and humble the klippa, we're not actually even destroying the klippa. We're just humbling it. When we can humble the klippa, we can humble our own, what we're hiding behind, what we think we are, what we're portraying we are, whatever we think we are in the world, or even to ourselves. We can maybe touch the soul. Let him further consider his consider his dreams. Alter Rebbe is giving you another way to humble yourself. In order to humble a spirit, for one may learn more about himself in his dreams than from his waking conscious thoughts. Sheim hevel v'rois ruach. Think about it. How many people have dreams that have any kind of good context or any context to the dream? It's usually vanity, an affliction of the spirit. Some of us have nightmares. Why? It's because your soul doesn't ascend heavenward during the sleep. As the verse says, who can go up to heaven? Which soul can truly transcend the physical world? Niki kapayim, somebody who's has clean hands and pure heart. Meaning in our context, who shall rise heavenward when he sleeps to see and observe matters of Torah and holiness, which it will turn reflect his dreams? As at the end of the next verse, and the next part of the verse gives the answer. He who has clean hands and pure heart, implying the soul, one whose hands and heart are not pure, do not ascend. And that's why his dreams are patchwork of vanity and foolishness. As the Gemara says, usually you dream what you think during the day. So if I have a day of vanity, I'm dreaming of night vanity. That affects my neshama. Therefore, those originate from the evil side. And come and attach themselves to him and inform him in dreams of mundane affairs, narishkeit, hevel aval, and vanity stuff. And sometimes mock him, show him false things, and torment him in his dreams. As it's brought on the Zohar, Vayiked of Chafei, Amar Aleph Amar Beis, Ayin Sham Barichas, look over there at left. We thus see from the Zohar that one may evaluate himself by studying the context of his dreams. Thereby he can again humble himself. Even if he finds himself free of sin, but why is he having stupid dreams, dreams of vanity? Because he's involved with vanity, because I'm involved with vain things. So I'm so far from my soul when I'm so involved in vanity. And therefore, crush the Sitra Achra within him. Again, we're not trying here to bring anybody down. We're actually trying to uplift people. This is when a person thinks himself that how far he is away from godliness, how far he is away from the truth, will hopefully motivate him, inspire him to take a step forward, to inspire him to take a step forward, to stick away from vanity, to stick away from stupidity. Connect yourself, learn more, daven more, do good more. Why not? Why waste my time in hevel avalim and vanity, things of vanity, when I can connect myself to things of holiness? And that ends the Tanya for today. Today is the 30th day of the month, the Chodesh, the first day of the Chodesh, the 30th day of the month, which is chapter 145 to the end of the book. And we finished the Tillim. Through the past 30 days, we finished the entire Tillim. My friends, today the Rebbe writes in the Yom Yom, many Chassidim consider the day they arrived in Lubavitch to be their birthday. This is a Frierdiker Rebbe writes. Many people, Lubavitch, talking about the Frierdiker Rebbe was in Lubavitch, in the city in Russia called Lubavitch. That's where they got the name. Frierdiker Rebbe says, my teacher, Rabbi Shmuel Betzalel, arrived in Lubavitch for the first time on a Thursday evening, Pasha Mishpatim, in the year 1848. Came to Lubavitch, it's a city in Russia. Little city in Russia. Every year after that, he stayed awake all that night and took pains to put his tefillin on the exact time he entered into the Tzemach Tzedek. Then the Tzemach Tzedek was the Rebbe in 1848 for Yechidus for the first time. So he stood up every year on that night when he went into Yechidus. He would stay up the whole night, learn, and then he would daven exactly the time he went into Yechidus of the Tzemach Tzedek. You have to realize, those times, they merited to go into Yechidus maybe one time in their lifetime. And they prepared years to go into Yechidus, because not too many people lived in Lubavitch. Everybody, the whole Lubavitch, all the Chassidim came to Lubavitch, not such a big city to even live in. And they would be there for a while and then go back to wherever they lived. So and maybe they never came back to Lubavitch. So they prepared themselves to go into Yechidus of the Rebbe. They considered it as the rebirth, their birthday. And they would leave the Rebbe and maybe never see Lubavitch again. And therefore, every year, they celebrated their coming to the Rebbe in Lubavitch. Yechidus means a private audience with the Rebbe. It's called the Yechidus. It comes from the word echad, oneness. Yechida shebenefesh, the oneness of the soul. A chassid felt when he went into the Rebbe, he touched the Rebbe touched his Yechida shebenefesh. The Rebbe touched the quintessential part of the soul, awoke in his soul. So in essence, that's why he felt it as his birthday, and he felt that he started a whole new service in Akkad with God. He started a whole new chapter in his life, walking out of Yechidus, the Tzemach Tzedek, or without the Rebbe. The Rebbe was a special moment. God bless you all, everybody. I want to wish you a wonderful and beautiful Shabbos and a good Chodesh, a wonderful Chodesh. And I hope you do Chitas tomorrow by yourself. In Mitzvah, we will come together on Sunday morning. We'll start at 8 o'clock. We'll learn the Chitas of the day. I wish you a wonderful Shabbos, a good Chodesh. Mishenichnas Adar, Ma'abim B'Simcha. When the month of Adar comes in, we have much great joy. May God bring joy and happiness to the Jewish nation on this day, and everything should be transformed from pain to happiness, from sadness to gladness, and from darkness to light. And may we all be blessed with a wonderful Chodesh, a wonderful month, and a happy and healthy day, and a wonderful Shabbos. Shabbat Shalom to all.